Hi guys, this is Young Neil from Advanced Property Strategies and welcome to today's podcast on your next property deal. As you know, our current theme is rooming accommodation, mini boarding houses and passive income, multiple sources of income. So we're really excited today to have Sue Hannay, who's a property mogul, you could say. She owns over 5 of these mini boarding houses. So that's at least 25 tenants paying her roughly $350 to $400 a week in rent before expenses. So that's really, really cool. And she'll be talking about, how to become laser focused and why she started off with certain strategies, why they didn't work, and why now she's purely and solely focused on this rooming accommodation strategy to get her financial freedom. Not only that, she's going to be talking about the learning lessons that she's had along the way, whether it's from blowout of costs doing land subdivisions to why she no longer does negative gearing, right? So all these cool things she's going to be talking about. So stay tuned. Here we go. Morning, guys. This is Young Neil from Advanced Property Strategies, and we've got Sue Hannay here. G'day, Sue. How you going?
Hey, Young. How are you going? I'm good, thank you.
Excellent. No, Sue's been working with me for a few years now as a student and now also a trainer. She's done very, very well for herself, and she's very, very clear on her strategy too. A lot of clients who come in with us, they try this strategy, they try that strategy, and after, sorting out a few ideas and trying this and trying that, Sue figured out what she wanted to do, and she's basically with a laser gun focus done that. So thanks, Sue, for being with us and sharing with us your property experiences, hey?
You're welcome.
Excellent. So on this particular podcast series, we're talking about rooming accommodation, multiple sources of income. We'll also call it mini boarding houses as a lack of terminology. Every city and state has different terminology for this. The National Construction Code calls it one thing. Rooming accommodation is what it's called on the Brisbane City Council website. So like I said, every city and state calls it a different thing. We like to keep it a little bit simple. We call it a mini boarding house with half a dozen or so people in a house sharing, certain facilities, but at the same time allowing the landlord to benefit from the cash flow and providing housing for people as well. So Sue, you're definitely a gun at this now. So tell us about, your experiences before that, though, right? What's your general property experience leading up to doing a handful of mini boarding houses?
Well, when we were in Sydney, we did a lot of buy and holds. So we had quite a few properties in Sydney for a long time, and we also did some vendor financing ones right at the early days, way back when.
Yes, it would have been like 2000s or something, I think, wasn't it?
Yes.
Yeah, that's when it was a fad.
1999. Yeah. So we were kind of one of the first in the game playing that for a while.
Yes.
Unfortunately, we bought about 5 or 6 properties on that basis in Sydney, and because the market moved so quickly within about a year, everybody bought out, which I understand and it made sense. So idea was right, didn't quite work the way we would have liked, but that was an experience. And then kept quite a few buy and hold properties, all negatively geared. Because that's kind of what we knew at the time.
Yeah. So just to come back on that vendor finance thing, I wasn't planning to talk about it. It is very fascinating because I remember John Burley was doing the seminars on that. Was that the guy who you watched? Do you recall? John Burley, American?
Yeah. And Tony Cordato was the sort of solicitor that we kind of started working with. So we actually set up one of the first contracts to be able to do it with him in Sydney at the time. So Tony Cordato was,
that's right, a solicitor. I do remember his contracts there. So installment contract and vendor finance, rent to buy. Then an old mate, Rick Otten, who got into trouble with that. Yes. Bring it. I was not planning to talk about this, but it's always good. I didn't realize you were doing that. You probably did tell me years ago.
I have.
But yes, but it's look, we've had many conversations over many years. So, but that's really, really cool because we all cut our teeth. I cut my teeth on that, and that's how I learned about options. And it was interesting because the philosophy was right. However, it was applied from an American context where the capital growth wasn't always that strong, right? Looking back on it, and obviously you locked in the capital growth with the buyer, and then that's where you kind of missed out. You made cash flow of maybe $200, $400 a week, but that's where the capital gain got cashed out. Is that pretty much it?
Absolutely, in a nutshell.
Yeah. Okay, cool. And then, so you transitioned made some good coin out of that, and then talk about the negative gearing experience and pluses and minuses of that, because I'm sure there'd be pluses of capital growth, but obviously the negative cash flow, and that may have hurt.
Well, it was actually, we were both working in corporate at the time, so this was kind of like our bit of side hustle, really. So it kind of worked in that environment because we were earning pretty good incomes between the two of us. So it was great to do negative gearing. It actually was advantageous at that point. Then I came out and started having kids, and we got a few other businesses, and and then we decided to leave the country, and that's when it was like, well, okay, this game doesn't really work anymore unless you're kind of earning that kind of money.
Yes,
it didn't work, and we went to New Zealand and lived in New Zealand for a year. And we started selling all of our properties. Now, had we just held on to them, we would have been sitting very pretty right now. But we decided to sell those, which it's all part of the journey.
Yeah, it's interesting. The buy and hold conversation, and I'll come back to it. Sorry, is that the buy and hold conversation is a very interesting one, like comparing Sydney to Brisbane to Melbourne. There's different markets there, and holding with debt or holding with low debt, holding with positive cash flow in good locations is a different conversation again. So, but yeah, you were saying something before I interrupted you?
Oh, no, I was just saying, life's a journey, and you make decisions, but we've kind of always played in property, even when we were both working in corporate, just as I say, a bit of a side hustle, but you're buying off the plan and then working with developers at the time down in Sydney.
Yeah, sure, understand. So now, your sole focus, I won't say sole as in 99.9, is the mini boarding houses. When I say not, you're just finishing a reno, but the part of that was to get a free block of land and build a mini boarding house on it. So what led you to this particular strategy after, I think you did a handful of splitters, maybe one or two subdivisions, and then you've basically dovetailed and primarily focused on this mini boarding house play, more specifically in Brisbane City Council. So tell us about that journey, after those properties, after moving to New Zealand for a year and leading to this journey. What led you to this conclusion and focus?
Put simply, when we came across them, because obviously you don't know what you don't know, and I've never been exposed to them. Of course, they only came into the Brisbane City Council, I think it was 2014. So when we came across them, we were like, what a great concept, because it's passive income. And we were very much starting to, we were in our 50s, we were very much starting to want to head towards the passive income strategy. We're going to be self-funded retirees. So our whole strategy is not about necessarily doing massive developments and getting good profits. It's actually about, no, we want to create long-term passive income. So we've got freedom. That was the play, to give us absolute freedom where we could work or not work. We could do whatever we want, but the financial stable was in play.
Yeah.
And so we,
keep going.
I was going to say, so we then became very, as you put, laser focused into that play to just start getting more and more of those.
Yeah. No, that's right. That's right. So I suppose in summary, for people who are new to this game or new to property in general, the mini boarding house concept or the rooming house concept is having 4, 5, 6, maybe 10 people in a building or over 2 buildings, which rent for initially, I think you guys were getting high twos, as in $290, $300 a week per room. And I remember that when you're starting off over at Manly West or on the Bayside there, you're in the high 2s, low 3s. And then now they're probably in the high 3s, low 4s in terms of rent per room. So which provide a passive income of roughly, $20,000, $30,000 per building, including debt, depending on the interest rate, depending on how much cash you put in. Is that kind of generally your understanding of that?
Pretty much. Yeah.
Yep.
The designs have changed a lot since we first started, but then there's been a big jump in the last year to now as well. As you know, build costs, land costs, everything is not what it was. And we were quite lucky. We've locked in quite a few interest rates back at 2.3 on quite a few of our properties. So we're, they're the ones that are bringing in, really good high yields. Yeah,
no, that's it. And so in terms of let's talk about the pluses and the minuses and some of the challenges and experiences that you've had there, because you're on to how many now?
A few.
A few. So let's just say it's more than 5. More than 5? Can we disclose that?
Oh yeah, a lot. Yeah, quite a few more than 5.
A few more than 5. Okay, that's the thing I like about Sue. She's very modest, and she plays her own little secret game, but at the same time, she's very generous with her information. When you get to know her, and with everybody, it takes a while to build their trust. Same with me. I've got a lot of IP that I've accumulated over 20 years. And some people, in some ways, I'll share it, and some people won't take it on, and that's to their detriment. I laugh because I watch it every day in the marketplace as people struggle when they want to do their own thing. But that's the thing is, people don't know what they don't know. So what are some of the positives or biggest learnings you've had to date doing these, Sue?
Probably on the positive, it's actually being that laser focus, knowing what you want and just going for it, and not getting distracted, because it's very easy to get distracted in property. There's there's so many little diamonds shining over here, and it's very easy to switch. So we were very single-minded about what we were looking for, and the suburbs and the prices of what we wanted. We kind of knew what land price we wanted, and so by being single-minded in that strategy, it allowed us to, I guess, create as many as we wanted in a relatively short period of time, which was that was the intention. I think, and then of course you get to know from the design point of view, you get to be a cut and paste. If you've got a similar block size and you're putting 2 on it, you can just literally cut and paste from previous, and so it becomes a bit more cookie cutter. And you refine from what you learn. So we made mistakes in the first few, and it's like, okay, we won't do that again, and okay, that didn't quite work. So you evolve, but you get to the point you go, actually, I really like this layout. Bang, bang, and then you cut and paste. So that's been the greatest learning. And then obviously working with the builder, you get to know, their weaknesses, their strengths, and you can work with that, and you can create the relationship such that, okay, we know we need to be on site to check this. We know we need to be on site at this point. And you get to understand that, which only comes from experience and actually doing it.
And it's interesting the transition. It's interesting the transition of the marketplace, of how you and I and the group, you could say, our clients and the marketplace has evolved. I know that I've been pushing a handful of things right from the beginning, like the transition from the 2-story to the single story, and based on my own experimentation, putting my butt on the line as well, and noticing that the rents are very similar, if not the same, as long as the room sizes are the same. And then, so that's one transition, going from 2-story to single story, to reduce the construction costs as well as the construction timeframes. And then secondly, the configuration of the single stories, and as well as the main road play, putting them on main roads. We found that the rents are very, very similar. Sometimes the land will be 50, 100 grand cheaper, and you can get a better yield. And I wouldn't necessarily build my whole portfolio on main roads necessarily, but I think that's where some of the opportunity has been, hasn't it? In being able to build low set, save 50, 100 grand per build, save on furniture, and at the same time, get some cheap land and still get some good rental yields. Is that basically your experience?
Very much so. Very much so. And I think because the designs have evolved, the initial low set designs were pretty clunky. They weren't that good. But now they've become much better. So the offering in itself is superior to what it was. And in the beginning, no one was doing them. No one was doing kind of low sets. So times have changed. And to your point, I remember the beginning, it was like, oh, it's got to be near bus stops. It's got to be near train stops. It's got to be near shops. There were all of these kind of rules attached to the earlier stages, but it's not that anymore. Like basically all rules are off. That's right. If you want to do it, do it.
No, and I think
it comes down to...
Keep going.
Sorry.
No.
I was going to say, it then just comes down to what your parameters are with purchase prices and what yield you're looking for, et cetera, et cetera.
And even what's evolved is because they are so strongly positively geared, the end product sale has really kicked in now. I know it's taken 3-4 years for the market to understand it. Like, and exactly what I'm talking about, getting a block of land for, let's say, 450, 500K build for, 450, 500K, call it a mil, 1.1. And this is, off the shelf hardly doing any research, hardly squeezing anything without any optimization, and off the shelf build it, and you can sell it in a B, C grade suburb for 1.3 million, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So and you know, in some ways for the beginners who are coming in, that would be their saving grace. One, because it'll be positively geared, or at least neutrally geared, depending on how much their debt is and their LVRs. But also, being able to build in that equity. Like, there's not many things in this current market that you can go in, build a house on it, slap a house on it, and create equity of 100-300 grand on paper, at least.
Correct.
You know, So, but getting the finance then becomes an issue, which we'll come back to very shortly. So we've talked about your positive experiences there, working with the builder, finding a cookie cutter system. So what are some of the negative experiences that you've had? Because the more that you do, the more you're exposed to positives and minuses. And as I say, property always costs more and takes longer. So,
yeah, I think probably the greatest negative would be the significant increase in cost that we've incurred in the last year.
Yes.
For building costs. Obviously, there's been 11 interest rate rises in the last year, so your holding costs are suddenly a lot greater. The demand for these is higher, so it's taking a lot longer for these builds to now come out of the ground. So you factor in those things, and they all come down to cost. It's a lot greater, and then you throw in the fact that because prices have gone up to even purchase, you've got a double whammy. You've got your build construction costs up at least 100 grand on what they were a year ago, and then you've got the cost of the actual land, even if you're doing the subdivision in it yourself, at least 100 grand up.
Yes.
So there's a 200 grand additional cost that we didn't have a year ago.
Yes.
So I would say that's probably the greatest negative that we've encountered. In terms of tenants and the actual mini boarding house scenario, we've had very, very low vacancy rates, less than 1% across the board. And we've probably had to evict maybe two tenants in that whole time, which I think is not bad.
It's really good.
And they all left pretty easily. So, you're going to get that the more number of tenants you got, the more exposure you've got to potentially something going wrong. But all in all, I think they're good. I think where the pain has been is more with council and doing the actual developments. Council taking a lot longer to approve the developments, hitting issues, as you know, some of my issues of my recent one on your civil works and things like that, where you've got, we had an extra 35 grand hit with the last one because the stormwater was in the wrong place, not where we thought. So you encounter challenges like that. And I think even when you're doing these projects, you're going to have some that run smoothly, but you're going to have challenges on all your sites anyway, because that's the name of the game, unless you buy retail.
Yeah.
And then you'll have challenges with builders because you don't necessarily know how the builder works.
Yeah. No, that's it. And then in terms of finance, then I know everybody's circumstances are different. Everyone has their different arrangements, residential, commercial. Just some tips for people who are beginning, because I know for a lot of mums and dads, it can be a bit daunting, talking about 1Bs. And if they talk to the bank goes, 1B. So just as a beginning conversation, where do you suggest people start?
Probably, I would say the very first starting point is get your own financials in place. Like, know where you're at, know what's going on, know your numbers, know what you can and can't do. And then obviously there's the play, whether it's residential or commercial, and that's a kind of by bank scenario, to be honest with you. You can't, there's no hard and fast rule on that, because they're now becoming very much a known thing. And so the banks, it's like an Airbnb situation. The banks still won't necessarily take, if you do it residential, they won't take the full income for a couple of years. They'll only take what you would have got as a residential one house, one lease income. Correct. So you might have a property that you've like you say, $1 million, but you might only have an $800 a week rental assessment attached to it. So that's not in your favor, but that's how they're playing it at the moment. That I think will change. Because I remember when we first talked to our bank, they said, these aren't going to work, because they couldn't see how these like little unit things would work. Now they're going, okay, well, they've seen us do so many and they've seen the results, and they're like, okay, so now they're taking our income after a year. which it took the first few or 2 years. So,
yes,
banks evolve. But as we know, there's a lot more support for these commercially. So, but I think it's like anything, you must have your own financials, know where you're at, know what capacity and serviceability you've got, understand what equity you'll have in play. And, I think if you can go residential, obviously you're going to get better interest rates, but bear in mind that the likelihood is getting lower and lower as time goes on with these. That would be kind of my
No, good stuff. So in terms of where you focus, all your properties are in Brisbane City Council, and obviously I know the reason why. But from your point of view, as a devil's advocate, don't you feel you're putting all your eggs in one basket with one strategy in one council?
No.
Well, do you want to explain that to people? And I understand where you're coming from, because I work in a very similar space, and I've been around the BCC market and all this terminology for decades. But just explain it to people who are beginners in a context that relates to them.
Well, I guess for us, these are long-term buy and holds. These are not, we want to get in and get out. That's not the purpose of these. The purpose of these is passive income. We're not necessarily looking for capital growth. Now, we will get that. And by being in the Brisbane City Council region, where obviously our proximity to the city is higher than all of the other councils. So we'll get by the default. Capital growth anyway, by default. But that's not the motivator. The motivator is passive income. And so for us, we've got some, in Manly, near the Manly Village area. So that's very much lifestyle. We've got others in kind of more industrial areas where you've got tradespeople coming in. So very different clients. So for me, if you look at the situation at the moment, we've got a huge rental crisis. We're renting these properties fairly quickly. We're not having any issues re-renting them. A lot of our tenants have been in there for a year, 2 years, some of them 3 years. So they're staying in there. So I can't, and even if the market has a crash again, we're still going to have a rental crisis. So I don't see us having any issues regarding the longevity of these. You could potentially talk about oversupply. Well, to be honest with you, I think before we hit an oversupply situation, we'll have where it's priced out, where suddenly they're not passive income or even neutral. They're going to be negatively geared again, because the prices are going to start getting to be too much. And your rents won't necessarily match that. But that's, who's got a crystal ball who can foresee any of that happening.
Look,
so I'm very confident. I'm very confident in this concept.
Look, I think there's a few other things that you haven't mentioned there, but you've already been doing it directly anyway. Is I talk about you make your money when you buy. Your cost base or your purchase prices on these, call it 600, 650 each, let's say, K, and then the rent on them, let's say 80 to 90K each gross, just at some real rounded numbers there, right? And now, from my understanding and my experience, that they'd be valued at least 1.2 to 1.3 easily in the marketplace based on those gross rents of 90, 80, 90K. There, so you've got 600K equity on the first at least half a dozen until that price increase went up for the land, and then let's say it's costing you, at rough figures again, 400 for the land, 450 for the build, so call it 850 cost roughly, and they're worth 1.2, 1.3. So either way, the values are there based on the rental income, regardless. And let's say the rent goes up to $400 a week, and there's an oversupply, you have to drop to $350 a week. So, that's where you were 3 or 4 years ago anyway.
That's right.
So I think, look, just playing devil's advocate, because people want to see me as the interviewer asking the tougher questions so that they can analyze these themselves. So in terms of what you're aiming for, obviously there's a passive income target, but also from just a gross yield. Do you have a gross yield target you generally aim for to give these guys, what talent or what skills you're applying, because they might be lucky to get an 8 or a 9% gross return if they're buying from a land marketer doing a house and land package, one of these, if they can get the finance. But so what's your kind of gross yield target?
Oh, look, we've got over 10, put it that way, is our gross. I think our most recent one, which is actually one of the most expensive, which we didn't think was going to be the case, is just over 10. because we got hit with some extra costs.
Yeah.
But that's because we're doing all the work. We're not buying retail. We're buying effectively wholesale, doing all the work, doing the subdivision, going through all of that.
Yeah.
And trying, the idea is to get a block of land that's a good 100 to, originally about 200, but now about 100 grand less than market. So that was always the play. To your point, creating equity instantly.
Yeah, no, that's right. Manufacturing that equity. And look, I understand. Yeah. I know some of the other clients, we won't say their names, doing like 12s, 15s. And I think earlier on, like I've got a 15%er at Richlands there, but it took me years to subdivide the land. And that was part of a land subdivision. And the more recent ones around about the 10% mark where the land's registered and I'm buying off a motivated land seller, right? So from that point there, either way, those 10% that you talked about there will still be net roughly 7.5, which will be more than cash flow positive. And you add that to the portfolio as it'll pay itself down over time. That's the LVRs will drop and the cash flow will increase. So, which is really exciting because it means you can go on holidays forever.
Well, that's the plan. I mean, and to your point, the first ones were closer to the 15% mark. That's kind of where the play was then. But in hindsight, if we'd known what was going to happen, we would have gone harder and purchased a lot more earlier on. But you don't know.
Yeah, that's it. That's it. And the market's changing. Who would anticipate, one, with COVID and the one, interest rates going up, two, with COVID, three, prices going up, rentals going up. So, if everybody had a crystal ball, my God, we would have played the game differently.
Completely.
You and I have been through multiple cycles.
That's right.
All you can do is plan for the worst case. And if it goes up, then you're winning, right? Because there's some people that are hurting out there, negatively geared, people holding on to property costing 5, 10, 20 grand a month that can't sell their land or can't sell their projects, because they've geared up expecting the best all the time, but it's not the case. So any parting words there, Sue? We're going to start to wrap up there. Any tips for the beginners who are looking at potentially just getting into property, potentially positive cash flow, just doing a dual key, do a granny flat in the back to make some more passive income for themselves? Any tips for someone who's on this journey and wanting to, increase their passive income?
I'd say number one, get a very clear strategy. Be simplistic in that and stick to it. Yes. And be persevere and keep things moving and stay in action. You make your money when you buy, not when you sell, your favorite motto. So I think that's fundamental, because that's what gives, as you point, manufacture your equity. And know your numbers. If you don't know your numbers, you're going to get yourself in trouble.
And I think knowing the numbers is one of those things. I know I'm very dubious when I'm looking at rental appraisals and what people say and vacancy rates, but when you've got your own property, your own rental property, and it's renting, flying out the door, like the recent one that I built, it changed my perspective of the rental market. And I basically bought another 2 blocks to go build ASAP, low set, in B grade areas, you could say, because the rentals are there, and I'm experiencing it with the own leases and my own tenants paying, fighting over each other. And you've seen how compact my rooms are. It's all
yes.
Yep. So if I could squeeze another centimetre out, I probably would have. They'd be hanging off over the back fence.
Instead of a chair outside, it'll be a hammock.
That's right. That's a set of stairs to go over the fence into the green area. So, no, look, Sue, I really appreciate your generosity and having a chat with us and having a laugh, because that's what it's all about. It's about doing property, making money, creating a legacy for yourself and your kids, and creating a lifestyle. So thanks for generosity and your knowledge, and we'll catch up with you next time.
Sounds great. Thanks, Nyang.
Cool.
Bye.
Thanks, guys, for joining us on this morning's podcast on Your Next Property Deal, featuring Sue Hannay talking about rooming accommodation, mini boarding houses, passive income, and multiple sources of income. So lots to learn there. She talked about, why she's so laser focused on this particular council, mainly Brisbane City Council, and why she doesn't think there's going to be an oversupply. She's not concerned about putting all her eggs in one basket, and why she has focused on this strategy, not doing negative gearing, not doing rent to buys, not doing decade-old strategies that cashed her out and left her with no upside. So thanks for joining us, and I hope you really enjoyed this. This is Young Ewing signing off. If you want to join our Facebook page called Your Next Property Deal, getting tips and hints from me, please go to Facebook, look up Your Next Property Deal, join, and our team will add you to the list. We look forward to catching up with you next time. Young Ewing Advanced Property Strategy signing off. Catch you later.